Hello, Kansas and Western fans. Today I'm going to start a new series for my channel, and it's basically going to be called Tools and Materials that I recommend for model railroading. And these are all based off of personal experience. I've actually used these, and there's several things that I've bought that I've tried I didn't like, and so I might review some of those as well, but this is going to be the first one, and this is called a flexible ruler or a bendable curve. I picked this up from Hobby Lobby, but I see it available everywhere. Walmart, Amazon, Michaels, all kinds of craft places and non-craft places sell these things. So I'm going to just give you a brief review of how I've used it and whether or not it might be something that you guys are interested in adding to your collection of tools. So let me put this camera down and get it re-angled so I can manipulate this thing and show you how it works. Okay, so I'm not sure what this thing is made out of, but it feels like it can be quite stiff. So there's got to be some type of flexible metal inside it. I'm not sure, but it's ringed all the way around by plastic. And sort of a rubberized plastic. And it might be rubber, I'm not sure, but I don't think it is. But as you can see here, it's got inches on one side, and I believe that's centimeters on the other. So for those of you that are metric, it still has you covered. And you can see it reads right side up. And as you can see, it's flipped there. But both sides, top and bottom, have kind of a I guess flat edge to it, and I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can bend this in such a way you can see it on camera. There you can kind of see it's got a flat edge, and you can kind of see there's kind of an angled corner on one side. And what that does is allow you to put a pen or some other, maybe a pencil, something like that, but a thin-edged one or a thin tip right up against that so you can get a nice clean edge to whatever you're trying to draw. Now I've used pens like, let's see if I can grab one here. I've used these Deco Color pens, and I use those to stripe the road on my layout. And this one says extra fine, and it worked just fine for that. And I would use this to demonstrate how I used it on this, but you're not going to really be able to see the yellow and white are the only colors of pen that I have, so that's not going to really help. But what I do have is a regular ballpoint pen, and what I can tell you about my experience is, even though you can see that this holds its shape pretty well, there's a little bit of spring action to it. And you can see as I adjust it, it wants to bounce back out a little bit. And when you try to straighten it perfectly out, it takes a little bit of work. And it's not, something that's impossible to do, but it does take a little bit of work. And I've tried laying it on its face to try to get it to straighten out, and it still isn't quite perfectly straight. And you can kind of see a little bit of an undulation there. So that might be a bit of a drawback, that if you want it perfectly straight, it's going to take a little bit of effort. And I guess the other drawback would be that springiness, spring tension that's on there. And you can see how that's illustrated there. So when I drew the curves on my layout, and I'll show you those in just a second, but when I drew those, I would basically have to set up, and I was using the edge of the road as a measure for the outside. And let me just draw this out here. Actually, let me just move over to the layout and I'll show you what I mean. All right, I'm not sure how well these stripes are going to show up on camera. I'm not going to really be able to tell until I watch this after I've recorded it. But I used marks every so often to find the center point on my highway here, to then figure out how to bend the ruler and then use the pen. And so it wasn't perfect. Like I could hold it fairly straight, but what I ended up doing was finding my line of, I guess, marking that I wanted to mark, and then I would anchor one end of it with my thumb like that, and then hold maybe the next 4 or 5 inches with my other finger. And let me get a pen real quick. All right, I've got a pen here just to demonstrate. I'm not going to draw on this because I don't want to mess up my pretty road. But basically, then what I'd use is, with my other hand, use a pen to mark the stripes like that. And then as I moved down, I would anchor the next little section and then mark those stripes like that. So that's kind of what it required, because again, it doesn't sit perfect, and my road isn't perfect either. I'll admit that. It's not perfectly level. And so it doesn't want to sit perfectly flat. And I think that's more of a function of the imperfection of my road than it is the ruler itself. So I'm not going to blame the ruler on that. But in terms of maintaining a straight line, you really had to kind of anchor it. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a drawback. It's just something you had to consider. And if anybody else out there has used this product, then maybe you can share some recommendations in the comments. But that's how I used it. I'm going to move back over to the bench here to show you how it can be used in practical sense. All right, so the whole reason I bought this was my road has some curves in it, as many roads do. So I couldn't use a standard ruler. So I needed some type of straight edge. And I know a lot of guys out there will use masking tape, but I was afraid if I used masking tape for my road lines that I would pull up the paint of the road once I'd finished striping. So I decided to try this. I'd seen it on another channel, but basically, let's just pretend for a second that this curve is the curve of my road, and I was going to be doing an outside stripe right along the road edge. So here I am anchoring down the ruler so it doesn't move, and then I would just use the pen and follow it right around the curve, hopefully not getting my finger in the way. And then I would anchor it every few inches to make sure it held the line that I wanted to keep. But you can see how easy it is to use. Just like that. And then there's your road stripe, if you can see that. So it became a very easy curve to follow and very clean. So I didn't have any overlapping or anything like that. Well, I guess there was a little bit there because I got a little bit hurried trying to do that. But otherwise, for a thin line like that, it worked out really well. Now, the one thing I am going to go ahead and demonstrate, and we'll see if you can see it or not once the video comes out, but I am going to try to use this pen, and this is what I use to do my road markings, and this is a Deco color pen with yellow. And the one thing I did find out, and what you're doing is you're letting out a little bit of paint as you press down the point. So as you moved it along, if you weren't careful about how quickly you move, sometimes the paint would bleed. And if you didn't maintain a secure seal, which these edges are kind of a secure seal, you would find that there would be paint that would end up on the bottom. And then you have to be careful about moving this and then adding a daub of paint somewhere else on your road or other surface. So what I would do with that is, if I saw that starting to develop, I saw some paint bleed on the bottom, I would either just clean it off or just let it dry for a little bit. And this stuff, these pens dried really quick. That way I didn't daub a blot of paint elsewhere on my road. So that was something else that you might have to consider. And here, I guess you can see that yellow okay. That's what it looked like. Now, the little dots that you can see, that's where I paused with that pen. And so it does leave a little bit of bleed. And now part of that could be because I'm using paper and it wants to just bleed into the paper. I don't think that would happen on any kind of road surface. And my road is made out of joint compound, so it didn't bleed that bad. But it is, that's more the pen than the ruler. So that's a discussion for another time, but something else to consider. Now, in terms of what this ruler is capable of, when you buy it in the package, it's actually all bent together, something similar to this. So it can make some really tight curves. And I literally bought this just to make stripes on my road because I didn't want to mess with masking tape, and I'm very happy with the results. But there might be all kinds of other applications, if you're an artist or whatever. But on a model railroad, I'm not sure what else you could use it for, but I don't have that good imagination. So maybe somebody else out there might be able to think of something. But I just wanted to share this interesting tool that I did not know anything about until it was time to stripe a road, and I found it very good for that purpose. And after I'm done here in just a second, I'm going to do a brief overview of the stripes of my road, and you can judge how well they turned out yourself. But that's about it for now. I'm going to do several more of these videos as I find neat tools and neat materials that I've used, some of which aren't for the model railroad industry, like this. This wasn't marketed for model railroading. Just to help you guys out with other ideas of ways to solve problems on your model railroad. So hang on just a sec. We'll do a brief tour of the road, and you can judge how good a job I did on the striping. Otherwise, that is it for now. I appreciate you all for watching. You can see where I did mess up in a few places. The paint, and that's why I want to do the pens in a different video, because the paint pens are something else to master. For the most part, though, I'm pretty happy with the results. That's it for now. Everybody have a great day.